Katagonia's Guide for Zoom Users. Panduan Katagonia untuk pengguna Zoom. Saat ini, host atau admin sudah mengaktifkan fitur interpretation. Bapak Ibu dipersilahkan untuk menggunakan Zoom versi terbaru agar fitur interpretation dapat bekerja dengan baik. The host has activated the interpretation feature. Ladies and gentlemen, you are expected to use Zoom. Please install the latest version for the interpretation feature work well. Please go to www.zoom.us/download. Mohon Bapak Ibu menonaktifkan mic atau mengklik tombol mute apabila tidak sedang berbicara. To help today's meeting run smoothly, please mute when you are not speaking. Jika Bapak Ibu ingin mendengarkan terjemahan dalam bahasa Indonesia, klik interpretation, pilih Indonesian. Anda tidak perlu pindah channel saat berbicara. Jangan khawatir, pembicara dan interpreter dapat mendengar Anda. If you'd like to listen in English, click interpretation, then choose English. You don't need to change channel when speaking. Don't worry, the resource person and the interpreter will be able to hear your voice. Untuk pengguna Zoom Mobile, klik More untuk masuk ke pilihan berikutnya. Pilih Language Interpretation. Lalu pilih Indonesian untuk bahasa Indonesia. For Zoom mobile users, click More to go to the next choice. Then, choose Language Interpretation. Then, choose English for English. Mohon dipastikan bahwa Bapak Ibu sudah memilih salah satu bahasa yang akan digunakan. Karena jika Bapak dan Ibu tidak memilih, suara Bapak dan Ibu akan mengganggu pembicara dan proses penerjemahan. Terima kasih atas perhatian dan kerjasamanya. Please make sure that you have selected the correct language for not making any noises for both speakers and interpreters. Thank you for your attention and cooperation. Jika ada kendala mengenai fitur ini, silakan hubungi host yang sedang bertugas atau hubungi IT support. If you have any technical problems regarding this feature, feel free to chat the host on duty. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Ministry of Finance Learning Week Day 1 is about to begin. But before that, let me take a moment to review a few technical details. First, to help us recognize you, please rename your ID with the format unit_name. Second, to reduce noise and prevent any sound problems, please mute your audio, but do not forget to activate your video. Last but not least, I would like to remind all participants that you can drop your questions via Zoom chat or Slido that we've provided. And also, we want to know your feedback about this webinar, so please fill the evaluation form after joining this session on the link that we will share with you on the chat box. For those who want to get the e-certificate, please ensure that you fill the evaluation form and join this webinar until the end. Today's webinar will be conducted in English. However, it comes with English-Indonesian simultaneous interpretation. To listen to the translation, click the globe icon or three dots icon below, and then select Interpretation and choose English-Indonesian accordingly. It is advised that you do not click the mute original audio, but should you wish to do so to obtain a clearer audio rendition, please make sure to manually switch off the interpretation when someone on the floor is speaking in the language that you are listening into. This webinar is also available on our YouTube channel, BPPK Kemenkeu RI. That's all the information, and let us now begin the Ministry of Finance Learning Week Day 1, the future of corporate learning. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Recording in progress.
Welcome back to Ministry of Finance Learning Week 2022. This is the second year of Ministry of Finance Learning Week as part of the Ministry of Finance Learning Festival. Last year, we had a remarkable experience with all the speakers. And with the total numbers of 4,674 participants, we were very grateful to be able to get positive feedback and appreciation to organize this event again. Surely, this time will also be amazing as well, because in the next 4 days, we will have 4 distinguished speakers who are experts in many aspects of learning. And we will start today with the theme, the future of corporate learning. First of all, I would like to thank God the Almighty that has given us blessings to virtually attend this webinar. And I would also like to extend my very warm welcome to the Chairman of Financial Education and Training Agency, Bapak Andin Haryanto, to all senior officials from the Ministry of Finance and other ministry and also agencies of Indonesia, to our special guest speaker, Martin Moehrle, and also best regards to all participants who have joined us today. We are very grateful for the enthusiasm of the participants, and I'm very pleased to announce that now we have around 700 participants who are joining this event via Zoom and also YouTube at the moment. Dear participants, before we begin, we are pleased to listen to the welcoming remarks by the Chairman of Financial Education and Training Agency, Bapak Andin Haryanto.
Okay. Thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon to all of you. Honorable senior officials from the Ministry of Finance and other ministries or agencies of Indonesia, Honorable Speaker, Mr. Moehrle, and Moderator, Mr. Pilar Wirotama, distinguished participants. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you to the Ministry of Finance Learning Week 2022. They will be held in half-day webinar from today, 17th October, to Thursday, 20th October 2022. Please see the detailed arrangements on our website and make sure to save your date. For the events, we have invited eminent international speakers to share their knowledge and vast experience with us on running organizations. As for this afternoon, please allow me to extend my gratitude to the speaker, Mr. Moehrle, Director of Corporate Services at the European Foundation for Management Development, or AFMD. A big thank you is also extended to our jury moderator, Mr. Wirotama, Head of Divisions of Learning Quality Assurance and Certifications at the Financial Education and Training Agency. Ladies and gentlemen, many organizations, both public and private, have successfully implemented learning organizations to address the issue of disruptions, such as technological, millennials, and pandemic disruptions, and drives innovations that make organizations be more relevant to today's and future worlds. Big companies such as Microsoft, Apple, General Electric, Toyota Motor Corporations have implemented learning organization consistently, likewise many government organizations in the world. In this regard, the Ministry of Finance of the Republic of Indonesia has also conducted a series of systematic and structured transformations in the last 20 years to be an effective and productive organizations. To many extents, the Ministry of Finance has also implemented many actions to become an effective learning organizations. Ministry of Finance has made serious efforts to improve the capacity and competencies of its officials to transform themselves both individually and collectively to achieve better performance to support the organization's missions. Since 2017, the Ministry of Finance has initiated and implemented the Ministry of Finance Corporate University, which is very important as an engine to achieve the Ministry of Finance as a learning organizations. To become a knowledge organization, Ministry of Finance has strived in creating, acquiring, interpreting, transferring, and retaining knowledge that has been facilitated in a digital platform, so-called Kemenkeu Learning Center, or KLC. We have designed our integrated learning model that makes various types of learning models, starting from structural learning and community learnings to experimental learning using a digital platform. Thus, within the Ministry of Finance Corporate University, learning can be undertaken anywhere and anytime, both at work and or in classes. Ladies and gentlemen, Ministry of Finance Learning Week is one of the main activities of the Ministry of Finance Learning Festival 2022. This activity aims to provide insights into the best and latest learning practices in the organizational learning directly from international organization learning experts. This afternoon, we have a great international speaker, Mr. Moehrle. Hello, Martin. Good morning there in Europe.
Hello.
It is our privilege to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Martin has been advising numerous organizations, many of them Fortune Global 500 companies, on corporate transformations and culture change. He has been a past and present member of advisory councils at business school, such as Wharton School, INSEAD, ESMT, and many more. And as far as I'm concerned, Martin has been also involved and has worked with several state-owned enterprises in Indonesia to access quality in the design and function of corporate universities and learning organizations. So today we will have his sessions talking about the key important elements or functions in a learning organizations. We will get a very pleasant session with him and get some input on how to cultivate a learning culture within the organizations, particularly in the public sectors and the future corporate learnings. Martin, thank you for your presence today. I believe your session will be very insightful and will inspire us to accelerate the implementation of learning organization in the Ministry of Finance. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to take this opportunity to officially open the 2022 Ministry of Finance Learning Week. I wish you a very successful learning session for the next 4 days. Please do take advantage of the session as much as possible, and I believe the benefit of this event will be remarkable. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Bapak Andin Hadianto, for the welcoming remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, now it's the time for the main event that we have been waiting for. But before that, let me introduce the moderator for today's session, Mr. Pilar Wirotama. Usually, he is called as Mas Pilar. Mas Pilar works at the Financial Education and Training Agency Indonesia. He serves at the head of Learning Quality Assurance and Certification at General Affairs Training Center. He holds a master's degree in Public Relations and Corporate Communications from School of Professional Studies, New York University, United States of America. Without further ado, Mas Pilar, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Esther, for the kind introduction. It is such a great pleasure to be here. Honorable Chairman of the Financial Education and Training Agency, Bapak Andin Hadianto, Honorable Senior Official from the Ministry of Finance and other ministries and agency of Indonesia, Honorable Speaker, distinguished participants, and my Ministry of Finance fellows, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. As introduced by Esther, I'm Pilar Yorotama. I'll be your moderator for our first day of Ministry of Finance Learning Week. Although this afternoon is a little bit gloomy here in Punawarman, Jakarta, but I can really feel the spirit, the excitement, and also the enthusiasm of the participants. So thank you for that. So ladies and gentlemen, as an intro, we all know that COVID-19 pandemic has affected many aspects of our life, including the way we work and the way we learn. The term work from home and hybrid working became more popular in the past 2 years. So as digital learning, such as distant learning, e-learning, and micro-learning seem have become the learning solution during the pandemic for many organizations. Many experts predict that we will now enter the endemic era. The question is, how is the future of corporate learning in light of the major changes the world is undergoing, from the pandemic to digital transformation to transitioning towards a knowledge and Internet of Things era? So we will discuss this matter together with our inspiring speaker, Mr. Martin Moehrle. But before we invite him on screen, please allow me to share a little bit about his profile. So Martin Moehrle is a thought leader, management consultant, and former global head of talent and learning at UBS and at Deutsche Bank. In 2015, he reopened his managing consulting practice. Martin has advising numerous organizations, many of them Fortune Global 500 companies, on corporate transformation and culture change, as well as on adapting their HR, leadership, talent, learning, and DEI practices to the new realities of work. Martin is also Director of Corporate Services at EFMD, European Foundation for Management Development, where he manages the value proposition for corporate members and CLIP, the premier quality management system for corporate learning. Martin has been past and present member of Advisory Council at business schools and HR think tanks, such as Wharton School, INSEAD, ESMT, Goethe University, and Frankfurt School. He's also senior advisor to EFMD, founding members of ECLF, and member of the executive board of ICEDR. Like I mentioned before, we are having a very inspiring speaker here, and without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on screen Martin Moehrle. Good afternoon, Martin.
Hello, and I feel very privileged to be invited to share my thoughts with you today.
Yes, so I suppose to say good morning, right? Because you are in Frankfurt now, and it's 9 a.m.
Yeah.
in Frankfurt. Okay, good morning to you, and also good afternoon to all the participants. Again, thank you for joining us today. It is great to have you here, because I heard that you just got back from your holiday trip. Is that true?
Yes, I had 2 packed weeks together with my wife in the United States. And after having been grounded for 2 years, more or less at home, and before I traveled a lot, this was again a bit back to normality for me.
Okay, what a lovely. Okay, Martin, just a quick question before we start. So today's topic is the future of corporate learning. When we talk about the future, we should not forget the past, right? As we may know, the past 2 years we were in the pandemic. If you were asked to pick one word that describe corporate learning in the past 2 years, what will it be and why?
It would be digital. And it is because in this unplanned social experiment, which the pandemic has been, the question about should learning be in person or digital, which we dealt with for 2 decades, has been clearly answered, and digital made it. It has proven to be inclusive and effective, so that I would say it has been, the pandemic, a significant accelerator of digital learning, and therefore my choice to put digital at the top of the list.
Okay, what an interesting question. And I believe that you will explore more about digital learning on your presentation, right? Okay, we cannot wait to hear your presentation. So, ladies and gentlemen, a few more seconds, Martin will bring us to his inspirational thoughts about the future of corporate learning. But before we start, I would like to inform you, if you have any question during Martin's presentation session, please feel free to drop your question in the Zoom chat box, or you can also access Slido with link bit.ly/pertanyaan-KLW, or you can also click the raise hand button later on the Q&A session. And for you who access this session from our YouTube channel, you can write your question in the on the YouTube live chat as well. Well, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let us listen to Martin's presentation. Martin, the screen is yours.
Thank you. I will share my slides with you, and we'll put it on full screen. And now it's not yet coming up. Here we go. So, yes, the title of my input is The Future of Corporate Learning, and I mean how it is evolving to remain relevant in the 21st century. I've been nicely introduced here by moderators, so with no further ado, I want to structure my input in 3 chapters. The first is talking about what I observe as the major trends, the major transformational forces that we see in society as we have moved into the 21st century. And in the second chapter, I would like to explore what that means for corporate learning. If these trends really make their mark on how we work and live, how does corporate learning have to evolve? And in the last and third chapter, I would like to discuss how corporate learning functions as I work with them are transitioning, transforming, reinventing themselves to really continue to be effective in this new world. So I would like to start first in discussing the future of work. And I have to say, as dramatic as the pandemic has been in how it has limited our degrees of freedom and in living our lives, it at the same time has been an accelerator, an opportunity to move forward with many aspects of work and learning, which were over the years pending and not really moving on. And it has also unleashed and liberated many ideas, which I would like to explore. First, I think that's pretty clear to everybody. I would like to discuss that as we move from the industrial age, from the 20th century towards the internet age and the knowledge era of the 21st century, major contexts and pillars of how we managed work and learning are moving and changing. So you see here on the left side, the industrial context, where work has been structured into white collar and blue collar. White collar designs work, blue collar executes work. And productivity was managed in making sure that the execution happens flawlessly. So you had to train people in deliver and executing work processes in high quality. The organization, as you see at the very bottom, has the power and owns all the assets, and the individual is just invited into the arena to execute his or her piece of work. On the right side, in the knowledge-based context, this is a different world. And already in 1982, so that's 40 years ago, Peter Drucker wrote about the management of the knowledge worker and how difficult and different it is to manage productivity of knowledge workers. The knowledge worker is an extension of the white collar, but there is no real difference between white and blue collar anymore in a knowledge era. Everybody is designing and executing somehow at the same time. People that come to the office in the morning have the degree of freedom as knowledge workers to decide their priorities, to prioritize throughout the day, to reach out to whoever they think is the right person to reach out to execute their work. So there's much more ownership and power on the side of the individual to manage the own work. And how you manage productivity in that system is a different ballgame. And I would here say that it is much more about empowerment of the workforce and inspiration of the workforce and delivering a purpose so that everybody can align to that purpose and make sure that what he or she is doing is contributing to the bigger cause. And on the left side, in an industrial context, the bigger cause was less relevant because the space within which somebody was able to perform was much more defined and limited. Now, you see that we move from the left to the right, from the industrial to the knowledge-based context over several decades. And large organizations are a mix of both. You have call centers, operational centers, which are very much still managed and will continue to be managed along Six Sigma and quality concerns, like in the industrial context. And there is an increasing part of value creation happening in the knowledge era. So we see a shift which is slow from the left to the right. We might say that in emerging markets that has a bit of a time lag, and but it will follow the same logic. The second observation is that we move from predictable to unpredictable. That on the left, all of the traditional talent practices that have been designed in the industrial age in the second half of the 20th century. This is where we designed organizations in terms of hierarchies along efficiency measures only. We designed departments and jobs and clearly defined job descriptions and said, this is your area of responsibility. We designed compensation systems which had a long-term logic. We designed career paths which were long-term. And everything was designed along the assumption that this is a stable environment, a predictable future. And we know that this is not the world in which we live anymore. And what we need is to move towards the right, that we have managerial practices which support agile businesses, which are adaptive. And so we see many, if not all organizations experimenting with new management practices, with new talent practices, with new learning practices, which allow an organization to adjust and adapt to an ongoing changing environmental context. In the old world, it was restructuring and again restructuring and again restructuring, which was a very costly approach in terms of financial cost, but also emotional cost. You unfroze an organization, redesigned it and refroze it. What we need is a system which is living, which is adapting and adjusting itself ongoingly with less pain. And this is nothing which is already clear. So we have every organization trying to move to the right. Nobody is there already. And it's an interesting time of adjustment. And some call it an industrial revolution. And different to political revolutions, which unplay in a matter of days or weeks, an industrial revolution deploys itself in a decade or 2 decades, but it's still a very accelerated change compared to the periods between these revolutions. So the coming of the internet has been a major force in accelerating this transition. The third observation that I would like to discuss is that we move from analog to digital. And on the left, this is just something which is every year updated. Now, this is the 2021 picture of just some example of what happens within 60 seconds. You see here a number of digital tools and social media, and you see the numbers listed, how many WhatsApp messages are being sent, more than 21 million in a minute, and so forth. So we produce significant digital information. All of this, what is being listed here, much more, leaves traces, data in multiple systems. And when we were just operating in an analog world, this data were on paper, in drawers, it was just conversational, it was not within systems. But now these data are captured in multiple systems. And if you put these together, this data, and you try to make sense out of it, you can really discover patterns which were not seen before. And that on the right side, that's an article of the Financial Times, which I copied, which is already 5 years old, about the coming of a new profession, the data scientists, the data analysts, which just try to make sense out of this humongous amount of data that we generate and combine financial data with operational data, with client data, with talent data and learning data to make sense out of that and to allow to personalize very much a value proposition or a learning proposition. Because now we have a digital environment. It goes that far that we now have Microsoft offering that as you write in Word or as you design a presentation in PowerPoint, the system prompts you and tells you what you could do better and that you made a mistake. So it's already a system which is very much allowing you to improve yourself through digital means. The next will be variables like watches and others that measure your blood pressure and everything else. So we will even allow yourself to manage your well-being through digital means. And the fourth observation I would like to discuss is the one which the pandemic has brought about us, that we move from office only to a hybrid environment of delivering work. Yes, there was the opportunity to work from home already before, but it was perceived as not really welcome. Managers struggled with it and didn't like that people work from home. It was perceived as, you don't know what the people do there. It's unproductive. It's a hideaway. So it had the negative touch to it. But through the pandemic, as over days and weeks, whole organizations had to move to remote work as much as possible. So in the administrative area, certainly not in the production area, it was realized, and a surprise to many, that productivity didn't suffer. So there is now a number of research underway that shows, yes, productivity suffered a bit, but people put in more time as they save on their time to commute. They have worked somehow more working hours, and the overall equation was relatively positive. So productivity didn't suffer, and remote work lost its negative image. It will be here to stay. We just see many organizations struggle to bring people back to the office. So we had just the issue of Apple, where Tim Cook, the CEO, issued the policies saying you have to come back to the office 3 days a week. And there was a petition by employees who said, but we don't want to. So it is a tricky one. My former colleague of UBS, Stefan Seiler, who is now group head of HR, just told me that he came back from a town hall in New York when he talked about going back to the office, where graduate trainees who were joining 18 months ago told him, what do you mean with going back to the office? I never was in the office. I joined this company remotely. I worked only remotely, and I don't know what the office is all about, and I don't know why I should go to the office in the first place. So that will be an interesting next year or two in how organizations somehow find their way, and any organization has to find another way in allowing to combine remote and office work. What I miss in all of the discussion is not only how many days you are working from home or not, is what do you do when you work at home and what do you do when you are in the office? coming to the office to sit in a cubicle in a corner and work on yourself, is it really making sense? Or is that not something you could do from home? But when you want to co-create together, when you want to create a sense of belonging and of social cohesion, when you want to allow people to strengthen and enlarge their social networks, then the office is the place to be. So offices have to become meaningful, purpose-led, and culture building, so that they deliver a real value. Because if you work from home only, you mostly communicate through your existing network. And it's very difficult to enhance and enlarge your network. What is missing is the serendipity, the conversations that you listen to in the elevator, in a dining room, of other people, where you get ideas between departments, across departments, where you just happen to bump into somebody else, and not everything is planned. There is a lot of serendipity, as we call it, of accidental interactions which drive innovation and creativity. And this certainly is missing in a remote-only environment. So here I would like to just discuss how work has transitioned over 150 years and how it will transition going forward. On the left is a statistic from the United States and how various sectors have provided employment from 1850 to 2015. And you see agriculture has been the largest employer in 1850, no surprise, and it has significantly come down. In other countries, it's even further down, like the country I live in Germany, it's down to 2%. You see other sectors, also the one you operate in, government, has grown strongly. Education continues to grow strongly. And this will continue to move and change in the 21st century. Now, the digital transformation on the right, you see here a summary of a very nice piece of research done by McKinsey and Company in 2016. So this was pre-pandemic, when the impact of digital transformation on labor is being discussed. And you see in the middle, McKinsey has clustered work into different categories: unpredictable physical work, customer interaction work, predictable physical work, office support, professionals, care providers, builders, manager executives, educators, and so forth. And they made the analysis of how digital transformation will impact different economies. You see on the top that there is India, China, United States, Germany listed as an example, how jobs will be displaced, in what percentages jobs will be displaced, as digital transformation will destroy jobs. And at the same time, it will create new jobs. So what is the net? Is the net positive or negative? And McKinsey comes to the conclusion at the time, it can be significantly positive if we are able to manage the transition from the past to the future successfully. And that needs reskilling, upskilling. It requires fluid labor markets and a smart governmental support and framework in managing this transition. So I'm an optimist. I believe that it will provide plenty of opportunities for growth, and a lot of work which was not necessarily the most pleasant work will be replaced by robots and artificial intelligence. So, and we'll discuss these transitions further in my presentation here. As an example, I just want to talk about the emergence of the gig economy, which is an emergent sector of employment where people are self-employed. Mostly it began with programming, coding software, and there are hubs like Toronto, Berlin, Melbourne, but also Ubud in Bali, where there are thousands of coders working for employers all over the world. And they are employed by nobody. They work, they take their job out of job boards, out of internet platforms where jobs are offered on an assignment basis. And they work just from assignment to assignment. And we see that this is a growing, significantly growing population around the world. And it has its impact on how employment is perceived altogether. We see that work will become more assignment-based, and organizations will less and less organize work in jobs, but in assignments. So you are in a pool of colleagues, and according to your capabilities, your past experience and performance, you will have access to project work, to assignments, and then you move to the next assignment and to the next assignment. And this creates here a list of changes you see from where we come and where we go. And so leaders don't own people anymore. They need to attract people. People need to have a sense of belonging, and they choose and are not being chosen. So this is a world of a renaissance, as we could say, of master artisans, like in the 16th century, where there is a professional pride in managing your career on your own, in developing your own skills, and being rather independent from a single employer. And your professional reputation is not only created within an organization, as I show here in this left model, but it is created over multiple employments in multiple organizations, some of which will be an ecosystem that co-creates value for users together. I was global head of recruitment at Deutsche Bank and at UBS, amongst other roles. And when we looked at CVs that were at the time, would say 20 years ago, too busy, when somebody every 18, 24 months moved employers, and you saw 10 employers, we found this not necessarily convincing. We said this person is not able to commit to something. You cannot see the results of what that person did because he or she moved on before you really could assess the impact of the work. Now it's the other way around. When recruiters see a CV where there's only one employer, only one department, and it's a silo career, this is something people don't want to see. They want to see people who are able to adjust and in a new context, in a new environment. And so it will become more acceptable and normal to move on much more frequently than in the past. This has significant implications on how you organize learning, because you have not the employees within the organization for 25, 30, 35 years and can build long-term career and learning plans, but you have to welcome every year 10, 20, 25% of your population as being new. So what does that mean for corporate learning? Here, I would like to introduce a magic square of managing human capital. And what do I mean with magic square? I mean that we enter the world of dilemmas or trilemmas, or quadrilemmas, where there are multiple objectives which are seemingly mutually excluding itself. That you cannot normally achieve both at the same time, but you have to. And I choose here two dimensions, a vertical and a horizontal one. And the vertical one discusses ambidexterity, a concept that we know since more than 20 years, which means managing the present and the future at the same time, meaning you exploit the present, that's at the bottom, you optimize the system, the value creation system, for optimal performance today. And on the top, on the exploration, you need to invest into future capabilities and prepare for tomorrow. And the more senior you become in an organization, and the CEO's role is the most prominent one, the more you are challenged in finding the right balance between exploitation and exploration. And there will be always market forces that push you in a disequilibrium. On the horizontal axis, you see the dilemma between creating stability, a strong culture, and at the same time to enable change and agility. And if you are a senior leader, again, you have to find the right balance in this regard. The corporate learning function and corporate learning in general in the past operated in this circle. It focused on exploitation and on stability. It tried to create and strengthen culture. It tried to work with subject matter experts in the space, as I call it, in the space of the known. Everything we know already, we just need to make sure that basic, intermediate, advanced level learners are enhancing their skills, but this is where we operated. And what we see now as an emerging focus of corporate learning is that we need to support organizations in the space of the unknown, in how to explore the unknown, how to operate in the unknown, and how to create agility. And this is new for corporate learning functions, and it was a major challenge for many corporate learning functions to adapt to this new need. And what is interesting is that as we move from the industrial context to the knowledge-based context, informal learning becomes more and more important. So the value that we create in the industrial context is mostly tangible. And if you look at the balance sheets and at the market value of stock listed companies in the industrial world in the 1960s to 2000, most items in the balance sheet were tangible. Now they are intangible. This is brands, patents, and not real estate and machinery and the like. Knowledge was very explicit in the industrial context. You could write it down and clearly write policies in how things are being done. In the knowledge-based context, knowledge is much more implicit. It's context dependent and needs to be interpreted in context. And learning was much more formal. You had taken people out of the working system, put them into a formal learning environment and trained them up the skills and then put them back into the work system. It becomes now much more of an informal approach to learning, where learners reach out and learn with and from each other in a much more self-paced manner. You see here on the left, the industrial context will more and more be replaced by robots and artificial intelligence and will be automated. On the right side, technology will be here to augment the performance and capability of knowledge workers. Here, if you look at the bottom of this slide, I compare formal learning and informal learning. And if I were asked to make a difference and say, what exactly is the difference between formal and informal, I would say formal learning is learning that is controlled by corporate learning. And the informal learning is controlled by the learner. But there is so much in between, which has aspects of both. Here on the top, I just picked 4 different learning modalities: in-person training, digital learning, asynchronous. That means every learner can learn at his or her own time, not at the same time as other learners. There are communities of practice and a buddy program for new joiners, which help you to onboard socially into the organization. And I created different categories of formal versus informal, of control. So knowledge and skills domain is defined. Learning objectives are defined, the time of the learning is defined, the location of learning is defined, the target audience is defined, even the participants are defined, the structure and the instructor is defined, and is it happening within the context of work or not? This is just a random selection of control aspects, but you see in person there's a lot of control, and the buddy program has, and communities of practice, less control by the learning function. And many corporate learning functions were working on the formal learning side only till, would say, 10 years ago. And more informal learning has to be complemented. And it's different to manage. Informal learning is different. You cannot manage it as you manage formal learning, because you don't invite learners into the theater, and you have not on stage the program being exactly defined but it's much more a matter of encouraging and enabling that then happens by itself. And that means we have to drive a learning culture, and we have to provide tools and processes for knowledge management to take place. And here you see a couple of examples of mixture of learning with formal and informal aspects. I just pick here a couple of them. A cohort-based learning means if you take Udemy or Coursera, which offer MOOCs, where you go through a several weeks or months long digital learning process that delivers a certificate or even an academic degree, there is a significant dropout rate of 90% or so, that people don't complete it because it takes a lot of self-discipline to go through that. But if you create cohorts, you just put 10 or 20 people together to go collectively through the effort and do nothing else but say, these are the names and email addresses of the others. You can reach out to them if you want to. This has a significant impact of almost doubling the number of people that complete it, just by having the feeling of being part of a community. Then you see what you just do here, learning days, weeks, festivals, where you invite your own subject matter experts and externals to deliver in a large group learnings. Then you have bar camps, you have a concept like Walking Out Loud, where 7 people are invited, which have nothing to do with each other, to just meet once a week or every other week for 3 months to reinforce and support their own learning agenda. You have communities of interest. So there's many, many more new learning interventions which combine formal and informal learning. And here I want to cite 2 of my friends. On the left, Julian Studd from the UK. With his social learning guidebook, he did a lot of work on social learning, which means learning within a social system, a team, a department, where he differentiates between formal learning that drives, as he says, consistency, conformity, and standardized strength, and social learning, which is great for building diversified strength and individual capability. It makes sense of activities, and it creates a local and individual context for learning. And on the right, I would like to cite Charles Jennings, who is Australian, who has for 20 odd years now very much promoted work-based learning, learning on the job instead of learning outside of the job in a formal learning environment. He says clearly there are 4 ways we learn most, that is, in challenging experiences. Just imagine if everybody in an organization would move every 4 years to a new job. This would be the biggest booster of learning altogether, because you always would have to learn to operate within a new, unknown context. And providing these challenging experiences is a major opportunity to learn, opportunities to practice, not only to learn in theory, but to practice drives performance. Creative conversations drive learning, and reflection drives learning. Experience and reflection drives learning. So this is very much in line with the need to move more towards informal and social learning. Here, I would like to capture the entire learning that takes place in an organization in a circle. The outer ring is the high control formal learning that is offered by the corporate learning function. In the middle of the donut is the big hole. This is the informal learning. And when I asked 10 years ago in workshops, the leadership team of a corporate university or corporate learning function, what are you in charge of? You could debate that for 2-3 hours intensely. But at the end, the outcome was, at the end, we are really held accountable for the outer ring only, for the formal learning. And everything else that happens outside our classrooms is none of our business. If you ask that question today, that's different. Learning functions clearly see responsibility for the entire circle, and to say we have to become a learning organization, as your chairman said. and that includes everything. So the former roles that we previously had was aligning skills to strategy, defining which competencies and skills are required to deliver on strategy, and building formal programs to really building these skills, identifying potential future leaders and experts, and accelerating the growth of that talent pipeline, organizing a space for debate and discourse on strategy, which strategic path should we take, and make strategy an inclusive process amongst all of management. And that was the strategic alignment on strategy. That was another role corporate universities had. They had the role of enabling transformation by formal workshops and training programs that allow people to experiment and use skills and understand why that transformation needs to happen. And in an organization in which I, for example, worked, where you operate in 70, 80 countries, and in each you have a training team, it is also governing the enterprise learning space and make sure that you work with the same models, the same external partners, the same technology, and so forth. So that was the classical 5 roles. Some of the corporate learning functions had 1 or 2 or all 5 of these roles. But in the new world, you see, if you also feel in charge of the informal learning, then there are additional roles that come into play. When I start on the upper left, it is strengthening the learning culture. There is a lot of talk nowadays about learning culture, but little definition is there. What is learning culture all about? I would want to say it has 4 dimensions, 4 aspects, 4 stakeholders. It is the manager of a team and how much he or she is really held accountable and feels accountable for development and learning within the own team. How much is this manager providing opportunities for challenging projects and roles? How much for every assignment there's a thought about what could the person learn? How can we make sure that the team learns collectively? The second stakeholder is the team. How much is there a sense of collaboration and of mutual support within the team? How much am I allowed to reach out? And how much do I get an answer if I reach out? And it's a matter of myself. How much am I curious? How much am I eager to learn and explore new things? How much do I just want to do my daily business and not really be challenged with new stuff? So it's learning agility. And the 4th stakeholder, the 4th aspect is, do I have tools, processes, means to learn? Is there material? Are there learning assets that I could reach out to? Is there a knowledge management system? Are there budgets and so forth that allow me to participate in an external event? So these 4 aspects, manager, team, myself, and enabling environment, drives a learning culture. And that can be measured, by the way. Then it is about promoting agility, client centricity, and innovation. Innovation is everybody's business. It's no more the business of research and development. Everybody has got a client. Everybody can improve the client orientation and the value that clients and users derive from my activities. It is to foster human augmentation, which means allowing people to improve and augment their productivity by using technology and artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is not our enemy, it is our friend, and we need to live with it in a very positive context and make the best out of it. There's research by historians that say industrial revolutions, as we have seen them in the 18th, 19th, 20th century, have unleashed significant productivity potential only 10, 20 years after the technology was introduced. So there is hope that the internet, which so far has not driven productivity that much in labor statistics, but that this will play out in the 2020s, in a decade ahead of us. This is a decade which will impact almost every job. Every job will be deconstructed. Some tasks will be automated. and new tasks will be added. So it will be a huge demand for learning, reskilling and upskilling for almost everybody. And therefore, I come to the fourth here, new role of a learning function. It is to enabling lifelong learning, always on learning, up and reskilling for everybody, and talent mobility from one role to other roles. Only this will allow an organization to thrive going forward. Now, in the last chapter of my input, I want to talk about how corporate learning functions have dealt with this new role, with this enhanced role, and how they are coping so far. This is just an overview of what has entered the world of learning in the last decade in terms of digital tools and solutions. And this list is only a select list. There's much more to it. The recent challenge is the metaverse. And yes, we have used virtual and augmented reality for customer service, for training in the technical domain. That has worked out reasonably well in the pandemic. Normally, you would have said technical training has to happen physically. You have to touch things, but we see a lot of augmented and virtual reality learning now in the pandemic. The only thing that is difficult to deliver is lifting heavy weight. This is not really possible to digitizing, but everything else is now pretty much part of the portfolio of any learning function. And you see here on the left, a survey that Jane Hart from the UK does every year. She asks, what are the top tools for professionals, for knowledge workers to learn? And she groups it every year differently. This year, she groups it in these three circles: the red circles, a circle for personal learning, the green one for workplace learning, the blue for education. You see, this is at the fingertips of a knowledge worker. Most of this is for free. Some cost a little bit of money, but without the learning function doing anything, people can reach out to so many sources of information, to colleagues. This is formative in terms of an environment in which a knowledge worker can work. And I guess at the Ministry of Finance, you will recognize some of these tools, and there might be Indonesian-specific tools which are not on this list. And that means it's not enough anymore to focus on the formal learning, where you have your own, I take this on the right side, the upper right quadrant, the company-specific content, the learning content that the learning function is designing, delivering themselves. Then you buy yourself access to libraries of learning content, being it LinkedIn Learning or Skillsoft or whatever other libraries, external content that you can access. But more and more, you now see that it's user-generated content which becomes relevant, where learners and employees upload their own content, and where there's community-generated content which is created as part of the discourse amongst the learners. And more learning functions also allow user-generated content and community-generated content to be part of the whole portfolio of learning material. This is just something you can download from our efmdglobal.org website. I was with two Russian colleagues at the time in 2018, writing a dictionary for corporate learning for the digital world. That's already 4 years ago. At the time, a lot of these things were new. Nowadays, they are old school because the pandemic, as I said at the very beginning, has so much boosted digital learning in all its facets that all of these is no more something new for learning people, but something of daily business. Still, if people are interested, you can download that book for free. We did in 2017, that's 5 years ago, a survey among our corporate members with just 2 open questions. The first question, as you see at the bottom, what do you see as the most significant future challenges in the corporate learning function? And at the time, I took all the answers and clustered them, and I found 6 clusters of challenges that were identified at the time. And the second question was, what are the major obstacles to coping with these challenges adequately? And again, I could cluster the answers into 6 clusters on the right side. And if you look at them after 5 years and ask yourself, what of these are still challenges? I would say content curation is no challenge. It meant that you would not only produce content as a learning function yourself, as a monopolist, so to say, but that you would also offer external content. You would curate it like a librarian in a library. And that was a very new challenge, but that is dealt with. And I would say we can tick that box. Digital transformation was at the time still something which many had ahead of them. I think that we can tick off. Agility was at the time a new concept. This is now, so the word is overused, by the way. Everything is called agility now, but the need for ongoing adjustment and adaptability, I think that can tick off. What we cannot tick off are the 3 on the right, green boxes: learning culture, learning experience, and learning analytics. These 3 are still a major area of concern for learning functions. If I look at the obstacles, I would say inertia of the legacy organization has been pushed away, overcome by the pandemic. The organizations had to move towards digital. The lack of new skills and new partners has been dealt with. Everybody had to introduce new skills and new partners. The lack of investment in digital infrastructure that were still deployed 5 years ago in the pandemic, all organizations have understood they have to invest in a digital infrastructure. That is ticked off. But again, the 3 boxes on the left, still being managed as a support function, too much bureaucracy, and we are still having issues in measuring outcomes. We mostly measure activities. This is still remaining as a challenge. And to complete my talk, and I see I'm already pretty much within my allotted time, I would say that the learning function itself was subject to digital transformation. It had to reinvent itself in a digital world. But at the same time, the learning function should support the digital transformation of the organization it supports. And I have found 5 areas in which a learning function can support the digital transformation of its organization by engaging leadership and mobilizing workforce at large, by closing the digital skills gap, by unleashing innovation, promoting agility, and by rethinking work as a human augmented intelligence. Now, given that it's already 8 minutes past the hour, I would like to be very quick in that. And I hope you will have access to these slides and can look through them yourself. But we clearly see that leadership is being revisited. And there's a lot of talk about that leadership needs to move away from some habits and behaviors, and new behaviors become more important. On the left, you see here a study done by Douglas Reddy, a friend of mine, who talks about eroding leadership skills, enduring leadership skills, and emerging ones. And that has been very much accelerated by the pandemic. Lifelong learning is not only to be solved by an organization, it has to need government support, and the educational sector needs to be reinvented. No time to go there into detail, but that's where a learning function can significantly contribute. In closing a digital skills gap, it can provide an online self-assessment tool. Many organizations have done where this just allow in 9, 10, 11 questions, allow you to understand where you stand with your own digital skills portfolio. This one with the link that I provide is for free, offered by the European Union, where you can take your own self-assessment. On the right, I provide here an overview of the higher education digital capability framework that Holon IQ, an Australian boutique, has designed, that allows for an educational provider to digitize demand and discovery of learning assets, the design of these assets, the learner experience, and work and lifelong learning. Again, this is a link here that you can use to explore that framework further. And certainly, innovation, as I said before, is a matter of everybody. And design thinking is the tool and the box of tools that has entered the learning world in the last decade significantly, where you learn how to map customer journeys, understand where your customer, your user is, which process they are undergoing in consuming your product, and where are their user pain points, where one can improve the experience, that you create personas of similar backgrounds and see how they move through their journey. And everybody can do that. In every job, in every role, you can think in that manner. And there is a lot of design thinking workshops offered. There are innovation labs and incubators, collaboration with startups to just increase the innovation capacity of an organization. And as more and more work is organized in agile methodologies, where work is organized in sprints of a month, of a quarter, with ongoing rebalancing and readjustment, and work is organized no more on an individual basis, but on a collective team basis. That is a new portfolio of tools that we use. Planning happens in objective and key results frameworks. There's Scrum and Kanban and the like. And the last is of these 5 areas in which a learning function can accelerate digital transformation, is to understand that there's not an either or an or. Either the machine does the work or the human does the work, but that there is space in between. And here I cite Doherty and Wilson with their book, Human and Machine, that there is a lot in between where machine and humans can really complement each other, and where AI can give humans superpowers. And that's what I mean with augmentation, learning how to use artificial intelligence in an intelligent manner. And this is where we'd like to come to an end. This is the CLIP Corporate Learning Improvement Process Quality Framework. That's an accreditation scheme, a quality management scheme that we offer since 20 years at EFMD, and which is a multi-month engagement by going first through a self-assessment and then through an external peer review, engaging all of your stakeholders of your learning function in reflecting on the value the learning function is creating today and what ambition it should have to create value tomorrow. And we have here 5 chapters. What's the learning function strategy? Who are your market segments? How do you understand the various segments? How do you engage with these segments and anticipate their learning needs? What's your offer? How do you deploy your offer? What are the resources within the learning team and the organization at large and outside that you orchestrate to deliver your offer? And what is the impact that you intend to have and that you do have? How do you measure it? And how does that feed back into strategy? And I had the pleasure to work with quite a few Indonesian state-owned enterprises who went through that process, and that provided me some insights. And I have been asked, which is a bit of a challenge, to have some reflections to conclude on public services in general and Indonesia, and how much corporate learning in a public service organization is different or not from a private sector organization. And I would say globally, public service organizations have not the reputation to be front runners in experimenting with new ways of work and learning. And that's understandable because there's strong governance by citizens, by the governance of ministries, and making sure that everything is fair and transparent. and compliant, and therefore one is a bit more prudent with experimentation. But I think there is no real reason not to think in terms of design thinking, customer orientation. How much as a Ministry of Finance can you really digitize your processes and really make the life of Indonesian citizens easier? How much can you fuel growth and inclusion within society? Everybody can have a role to play, and everybody should have a role to play. And I think public service, there is no reason why a learning function, a public service organization, could not be as bold and impactful than in the private sector. What are my observations that I had with the Indonesian organizations I worked with, like Pertamina, Telkom Indonesia, BNI, BRI, Bank Mandiri, and PLN, and also your central bank, which is a very impressive central bank, I have to say, which puts learning extraordinarily high on their agenda. I would say that the learning functions are, in my eyes, a little bit too similar. There is a bit of a blueprint. This is how a corporate university should look like. And this blueprint is implemented everywhere in pretty much the same manner. And I think there's a lack of experimentation with new ways, as trying to be in every state-owned enterprise a bit of the same. And then I found, yes, state-owned enterprises are not allowed to hire non-Indonesian citizens. I can understand that. But I found that there is much more opportunity to learn from what's going on in the world outside Indonesia. I found too strong of a focus on the domestic market. I understand that in terms of that this is the client that the state-owned enterprise should focus on and deliver value for. But there's so much going on within the own industry outside Indonesia that is a huge opportunity to learn from others and with others, which is not as much used as I would have hoped. But I see the public services and the state-owned enterprises have a very, very strong sense of purpose of serving the nation, more than I see that in other countries. And I think the public service organizations I work with have a strong employee brand, are attracting good talent and retaining good talent, and are rather competitive in the talent market, better than I see that in other countries. So that's, and apologies for talking longer than I was allotted to. That would be my input. And now I would be very happy to discuss some of the questions that you might have.
Thank you, Martin, for the insightful presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause for Martin. Okay, if I may conclude for what you just shared, I noted that there are three main chapters. The first is the future work is different. You share with us your 4 observations. The observation number 1, we tend to shift from industrial to knowledge base. We are moving to the right. And modern enterprise is basically a mix, gitu ya. It's mixed both of them. And also observation number 2, from predictable to unpredictable. Future talent should support agile business, not just support the ongoing employment and predictable future. Observation number 3, from analog to digital. You mentioned earlier that one of the highlights of corporate learning during the pandemic era is the digital. How social media is heavily used and also can be used to learn something new. And you also mentioned about machine learning. And observation number 4, from office to hybrid. So basically remote work works, right? And the productivity didn't suffer at all. And it provides challenge for the office. So to make sure that the office can attract the employee to come back to the office, it should be meaningful, purpose-led, and culture building. You also mentioned that job loss, gain, and change, and these need to be managed by the government and also the private sectors, especially on the transitions. And on the chapter 2, since the nature of working is different, then the corporate learning should be adjusted according to the changes, right? You mentioned about the magic square of managing human capital, explore agility and stability, how the manager can find the right balance for those among four components. And also you mentioned that informal learning is more important than ever, if I'm not mistaken. So you mentioned about the cohort-based learning, and you also mentioned about the Charles Jennings 70, 20, and 10. So not just the social learning is important, but learning on the job through challenges, opportunities, conversation, and also reflection is also important in elevating the competency of the worker. And you suggest it is time to shift from traditional role to to shift from traditional to the new role of corporate learning. And one of the components that needs to be exist is the learning culture, right? The learning culture. And learning culture consists of 4: manager, team, myself, and also tools and budget. And in the last chapter, you mentioned about corporate learning transformation journey. You introduced us to one of the survey result about 100 learning tools for 2022. We use some of them, by the way, Martin. But I think what you just presented, it gives us more inspiration how to explore another tools. You also mentioned that some of them are free and some of them maybe we need to pay a little bit for using that in our office. And also we should be focused more on informal learning, community or user-generated content, not just formal learning. And thank you for sharing the reference dictionary for corporate learning for the digital world. I think that will be a very interesting reference, because sometimes when we all talk about learning, we tend to make a mistake when we try to define something. So since you shared the reference dictionary, I think it's going to be very important for us to know, so we will not be, there will not be any mistake when we are trying to defining some of the term. And also, lastly, you mentioned about corporate learning should support or accelerate of digital transformation through 5 components. Okay, thank you, Martin. And I believe that the audience have so many questions. And I check on the Zoom. There's Pak Putu, who already clicked the raise hand button. I think he want to ask the question directly to you. I would like to invite Pak Putu. Good afternoon, Pak Putu. Would you mind to turn on your camera, Pak Putu? Pak Putu, can you hear me? Okay, I think it's...
Hello?
Oh.
Sorry.
Okay, good afternoon, Pak Putu.
Good afternoon, Pak.
Okay, so...
I'm sorry, I'm off camera because it's due to the unstable connection.
Oh, no problem.
You may allow me.
Okay, your question, Pak Putu, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Martin, for your such lovely presentation. I'm interested with, I would like to hear your insight regarding the digitalization learning phenomena that we have been experienced during this pandemic, actually. Is it something that you think that will be permanently exist, or is it just something that temporary, which might be back to formal learning back then when the pandemic is ended, something like that? Or are we going to move to a new equilibrium? Maybe as you a little bit give us a hint, something like that. Maybe the equilibrium will be hybrid, something like that. Because as a human being, I believe that we still need social interaction, something like that. So I cannot imagine that if we fully doing the things for learning digitalized, something like that. So what is your opinion about the future about that? Thank you so much for the explanation.
Thank you, Pak Putu. Martin, this is an interesting question because from my experience, people tend to meeting others when they are doing the learning. So what do you think about Pak Putu question? Please.
Yeah. The future of learning is certainly blended. It will be blended. The question is, how much do we blend in-person interactions and digital? It will be a combination of both. And we had a workshop a year ago with our members, and I said, there will be a time post-pandemic where either the pandemic is under control or we learn to live with the virus in a reasonable manner, and it will be part of other viruses like the flu and this and that, and we somehow have an endemic situation. And then the question is, if people can come back to classroom interventions, to your learning centers, do you want them to come back? And how do you find out what the right mix is? Do you do a survey? Do you do focus groups? Do you do expert interviews? Or do you just, as a learning function, say, we know it by our own, we just do this or that or the other? So I said, how do you prepare for this future? You need to engage your learners to find out, and in every organization that can be slightly different for many reasons, to find out what is the best mix of digital and non-digital. Some people live in more remote areas where there is no training center, they have to travel a lot. For them, digital is a much more inclusive approach to participate in learning. Somebody who lives in a metropolitan area might have more in-person offers. So it depends on the individual situation, on individual preferences, how much somebody would like to learn in a digital context or in in-person context. But learning paths that a learning function is designing will be a combination of digital and in-person elements. Will there be overcapacity of training centers? It's an open question. Maybe they are oversized for a blended world because they were designed for a world where most training was delivered in person. Some training centers, some organizations have begun to multi-purpose their training centers and invite vendors, startups, and others into these to make it an encounter with your ecosystem partners, value creation partners, and try to somehow invite R&D teams, innovation teams, create an incubator to somehow enlarge the portfolio of what you can do within the training center. But back to your question, yes, we need some human interaction. We don't need to, at EFMD, we had committees that overlooked accreditation of business schools, which were made up of deans of business schools. They met every quarter for 4 hours in Brussels, and people flew in from New Zealand, Japan, Canada for a 4-hour meeting, which is ridiculous. This is now done digitally. They meet only once a year in person, and the other meetings are all digital. How can you fly 27 hours from New Zealand for a 4-hour meeting? I did that myself. And so these things will not occur anymore, but blendful social interaction in person will be part of the portfolio again. How much? Every organization need to find out themselves. And because the geographic footprint, the distribution of jobs across a country or across the world is different. Some have big hubs, others have many small branches. So therefore, how much travel is involved is also a question that needs to be taken into consideration. Therefore, the balance between in-person and digital will slightly differ across organizations and individuals. But most important is to have an inclusive offer that allows everybody to engage in learning, and that you not only say 90% of our learners are engaged, but what about the 10% that are not engaged? What is the reason that they are not engaged? Have you an offer which allows them really to learn if they want?
Okay, so inclusive offer and also blended learning is I think the solution. It will still there, but the challenge is how to find the right mix between the in-person and also the digital, and it all depends to the organization, right? We have to count or have to measure our resources as our learning habits and etc. etc. Okay, thank you, Martin. And up next we have Bapak Ainal Ikram. He already clicked the raise hand button. Good afternoon, Pak Ainal.
Okay, good afternoon.
Okay, your question, please.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I just want to start my question with a statement that I couldn't agree more about your presentation about formal and informal learning and how it linked to enhance the performance of our organization. And the challenge in government activities that it has such rigid system that not including the user-generated content, as you said, as a big point on how to measure performance. Maybe hats off to our friends at Finance Ministry. I myself come from work at Audit Board of Indonesia, BPK. So hats off to our friends from Finance Ministry that, in my knowledge, pretty successful in embracing how informal skills of their staff. Because I have some friends there too, but that's not the case on most of other institutions. And come to my question is, based on your experience, how the government, especially in Europe or America, including the informal learning to enhance the performance of their governance. Thank you.
I think that I have not enough insight into the public sector in multiple countries to be really fair in my assessment, but I think in other countries, public services are not more advanced than in Indonesia. The public service is a bit lagging in experimentation with new ways of learning, it's a more traditional environment. My wife is a judge. She works at the Court of Appeal here in Frankfurt. And so when I see what they are doing in terms of digitizing their work, it's still far behind. Everything is still in paper, and seeing all the tons of paper that are moved around. So I always say, why are you not digitizing more? Why? Yeah. And yes, there is rule, regulations, laws, but I guess there is always a solution if there is a will. But the Indonesian state-owned enterprises, at least I worked with, found that they were pretty advanced in experimenting with new ways. Yeah, that I have to say. Indonesia is doing a good job in that respect. Clearly, there are still public service organizations that are not yet there. And I don't know the company that you're working for. I don't know enough about the Ministry of Finance, but I guess that there is a lot in that respect going forward. Allowing, as you mentioned it, user-generated content to be uploaded. Or was that a debate at the time? When I was at Deutsche Bank and at UBS, we cannot do that. People can upload stuff which is not true, which is offending others, which is offering the wrong solutions. And so therefore we have to ban it altogether. But I see people upload all kind of stuff on social media. They do whatever they do in their private time and with their private accounts. We cannot ignore that. And what we need is a curator, a quality manager of the content that regularly looks into what has been uploaded and to delete or to ban certain content which is not okay, and even have other learners comment on stuff which they find not acceptable. And so there are solutions like in social media outside that can be applied. And over years, I saw that this then has been implemented despite all of the concerns many years before. So I'm sure that also the public service in Indonesia will have that question about, do we allow user-generated content to be uploaded? And it needs to be quality managed. And the quality management is either in person or it's by artificial intelligence or other means, or other users quality control it. Clearly, you cannot let it go without management. But I would only encourage you to allow users to engage in a conversation with their peers, and that you offer and enable that conversation, because the conversation will happen anyhow. And just because it doesn't happen in your tools doesn't mean it happens.
Okay. Maybe may I share a little bit about what we are doing right now in Ministry of Finance regarding the user-generated content. We have a knowledge management system, Martin. We call it Kemenkeu Learning Center. So basically it's a knowledge management system. Since 3 or 4 years ago, we encourage the employee of Ministry of Finance to create their knowledge capture document. So they can create their knowledge document as an article, as a video, or as a podcast, and etc. And we also have a quality assurance team. So if they want to upload their knowledge into the Kemenkeu Learning Center, there will be quality assurance teams which is divided by the topics that will assess whether the document is qualified or not, is it credible or not, and if it's not, then the team will reject it, so it will not be uploaded. Yeah, well, we start this since 2018, if I'm not mistaken, but the challenge is we still having difficulty to make sure that all the employee wants to and interested in sharing their knowledge and document it into various media. Yeah, maybe that's just a little intro about what what we have regarding the user-generated content. But as the Pak Isar mentioned, that not every government institution has this kind of system. Well, luckily for us here in Ministry of Finance, we already have the system, but we still have a homework to do, how to encourage the employee to share their knowledge and document their knowledge and upload it into Kemenkeu Learning Center. Okay, that's maybe a little ad from me. Okay, Martin, we also have right now Pak Iwan Dharma. Pak Iwan Dharma, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Pak Iwan.
Okay, good afternoon.
Okay,
thank you.
Your question, please.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Thank you for coming out and great presentation you have delivered. Okay, I just stick to the question. You know that the world asking whether Google's media social platform are sentient. Okay, what asking are sentient? Well, asking about us, human being. You said that we have a profound change of the way we work, the way we learn. And of course, the profound change that we mentioned is we have less contact, we less socialize with the people of the college that we used to be before the pandemic. So, is there strategies that you message us how to prevent us from plunging into less human? Okay, that is my question. Thank you, Martin.
Okay, what's the strategy to prevent us to plunging into a less human, or how you
That's
make it?
right. Yeah.
How to keep it human?
That's
Although we have a lot of
question.
technology.
That's an interesting question. Clearly, I mentioned the risk that you communicate only within your existing network, and that in a digital world are less opportunities to broaden your network, which has been the major challenge of HR functions in the pandemic. When you ask what has been the biggest issue for you to the heads of HR around the world, they say onboarding new employees. That was the most difficult task. People who are working for a couple of years already within the organization had an established network of colleagues. For them, it was much easier to move to remote working. But those that came new to the organization and were not able to understand the culture, which means what behaviors are accepted and which one are encouraged and which one are not. And that was much more difficult to decipher for new employees and to build their network. And that is, if you put people into a digital-only environment, a major challenge that you really allow them really to operate at the periphery of their network. Is social media only good or bad for people is a debate since social media exists. I am in a generation which doesn't understand my two sons, where the smartphone is an extension of their hand, and where the Maslow pyramid needs to be enhanced, because before feeding and eating and basic physical needs comes battery power and Wi-Fi access. That's much more important than eating and drinking. So it's another generation which I still struggle to understand, but that's the new generation. Are they communicating in a less deeply human connected manner if they are only operating through that device? I don't know. So I might be too biased because I have been growing up like you, maybe in a different world. And we might have predictions about this is bad and we should ban it and people shouldn't have access to these devices before they are 14 and whatever discussions there are. But this is not an easy one to answer, to be honest. How much this will lose our ability for deep human connectivity. It's difficult for me to have an unbiased view on that. But I clearly would encourage that organizations would offer collective learning days once a month, or innovation days once a quarter, where they would invite into their Zoom calls participants, representatives of other departments, of other regions, that you try to create encounters with other parts of the organization and with the outside world within your ecosystem in a planful manner, even in a digital context. Some organizations I work with have introduced a coffee roulette, where there is an hour a week where you are randomly meeting people on social media from the organization, which are just by random put together for 5 minutes and then move on to have another 5 minutes with somebody else. And you just exchange who you are, what you do, and by that learn to know other people and other areas of the organization. Even in a digital environment, one can make it a planful exercise to really bring people together. Still, is that as deeply connecting people and creating a strong sense of belonging and a strong sense of understanding of the purpose is difficult for me to anticipate. Maybe it is. The new generation, at least, is still meeting in person. But their ongoing engagement with social media and their addiction to social media is something which I personally struggle with. And when I was in Jakarta driving from the airport into the city, and I saw these gazillion of motorcycles and drivers of cycles, and the people, on the one hand, they drive the cycle, with the other hand, they have a smartphone with a video call, thousands of them. And I think in Indonesia, the addiction with social media is as strong as everywhere else. And difficult for me to judge if this is needing further regulation and guidance and governance. I think we need to teach young people how to effectively communicate with these devices. And I guess schools don't do a good job in that respect.
Okay, so in the setting of organization or corporate, at least the organization can facilitate a meeting, or a gathering or an event, so where people can still meet in person and then make a social connection more human. But I'm agree with you. I don't know into what extent that the social media or digital will erase all the humanity in all of us. I don't know. It's still a question that needs to be answered. There has been no research about that, but at least we can do something in our organization so that we can facilitate our employee to meet more often with Innovation Day, as you mentioned, or family gathering, or any event like that. Okay, I'm gonna move on to our last question, Martin, and I'm gonna check on the Slido. So we have many questions. We have a lot of questions written on the Slido, but we only gonna pick one. So can we see the question? Okay, the question is, okay, from Sunshine, okay. How can we ensure that our employees are really doing self-learning? And how can we measure the outcome of the learning process? I think this is a very interesting question. Martin.
Yeah, you mentioned that the traffic on your internal user-generated content platform on your social media is still limited, and that participants or learners are shy or not seeing the value in engaging. And that's also a kind of a measurement of how much people feel required to be a self-directed learner, by owning their own learning and not being fed with a spoon the learning units by the learning department. And the manager feels that he or she can outsource his accountability of developing talent to the learning function, just participate in 2-3 events, and then I'm done. I have nothing else to do with it. So we need learners in the future to be much more self-driven, and that doesn't come easy. We need managers to understand their role of developing talent. We need metrics that drive how much managers really develop talent and how much they only develop results. And if they are kept accountable for developing talent and for learning, they will also, as a manager, take that much more serious and make sure that things happen within their teams. But we also need to let people know that their careers depend very much on their ability to learn. We can create a skills inventory and saying, this is your skills portfolio, and this is the skills portfolio of your job family within the organization, within the country, or if you take LinkedIn globally, these are the skills that are relevant today, and this is where you're missing 2 or 3 of them. And if you don't fill them, your job will not be secured and guaranteed for the remainder of your career. So you make it very transparent where people stand and where they should stand, and that should trigger much more their willingness to invest in themselves, because it's getting more evident and transparent for them how much they can secure employment and a successful career. As long as they depend just on the manager to inform them, that's not good enough. So we need an enabling system that creates transparency, and that creates nudges, and that creates incentives for people to invest in their own learning into their future. Otherwise, it doesn't happen by magic. It's a process that takes years, but it can be clearly supported by an organization in making that transition in an accelerated manner.
Okay, so the role of the manager, metrics will help, but the most important is to let the people know what's the benefit, why they're learning this set of skill, and emphasize that benefit so that the people will more eager to learn more. Okay, Martin, that will be the last question for our Q&A session, and I would like to say thank you for those who have participated in this Q&A. So before I end today's session, I would like invite once again Martin, as a closing remarks, what is your final thoughts on the future of corporate learning? Martin.
My final thoughts are that I'm very impressed by the Ministry of Finance in Indonesia to organize learning weeks as a large-scale intervention with several hundreds participants, that you stream that on YouTube. That sounds as a very advanced and future looking learning function. Congratulations for that. I think you are on the right move. You do the right things, and you should be a lighthouse for the public service in the country for others to follow.
Okay, thank you, Martin. And I just got news from the committee that the total views of our two-day session is 1,500 views. So, so it's more than what we expected. And I believe it's gonna be increased since we will put the recording on our YouTube channel. So the people who cannot see live our 2-day session, they can visit and watch it anytime they want. Okay, thank you, Martin. We thank you very much for this inspiring and enlightened session. We look forward to meeting you again in the future. Please stay healthy and see you. Bye-bye. Thank you, Martin.
Bye. It was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, let us give us a round of applause for Martin once again. Thank you, Martin. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now in the end of this session. Thank you for your participation. Hopefully that what we have been discussing for the last hours could inspire you to decide the best way of learning that could give impact to our organization. So I'm Pilar Wirotama signing off. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Back to you, Esther.
Okay, well, once again, thank you very much, Martin Moehrle, for your insightful presentation today. And I would also like to thank Mas Pilar for moderating today's session. It was very much appreciated. And to you all participants who joined us today, we would like to say thank you for your participation. And don't forget to give us your feedback about this webinar by filling the evaluation form via the link that we already shared in the chat box, which is at bit.ly/klwstrip2022, and the link provides evaluation form, presence link, and also webinar materials. Stay safe and healthy. See you tomorrow on Ministry of Finance Learning Week Day 2 with the theme Communities of Practice, Building Strategic Capabilities in Organizations with Etienne Charles Wenger. I am Esther Sulistina. Good day and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.